2:15 in the morning. The Gobi Desert. A Chinese HQ-19 interceptor battery was already powered up and tracking. Its phased array radar sliced through the thin desert air and into the vacuum of space. This was not a standard training exercise. For the first time in history, a land-based missile system had achieved a stable, weapons-grade lock on an American nuclear command satellite. The question was no longer if the battery could hit the target. The question was why they were choosing to hold the lock. The desert was a void of black sand and freezing wind. The only heat came from the massive generator trucks humming behind the radar arrays. Inside the command van, the air smelled of ozone and recycled oxygen. 3 operators sat in a row. Their faces were illuminated by the steady, unblinking icons on their screens. One icon was a bright red diamond. It represented a satellite designated Advanced AEHF-4. This satellite was not a simple weather station or a spy platform. It was a critical node in the American Nuclear Command Network. It was the secure link through which a president would authorize a nuclear strike. If this node went dark, the American response to a first strike would be crippled. It was the digital glue of the nuclear triad. The lead operator spoke in a low, measured voice. "Lock is stable. We have a fire control solution." The battery commander stood behind him. He did not look at the screen. He looked at the metal wall of the van. "Maintain the track. Do not deviate. We wait for the next command." 7,000 miles away, it was 11:15 in the morning at Schriever Space Force Base in Colorado. The floor of the Space Operations Center was usually a place of quiet technical monitoring. That ended when a secondary sensor on the satellite detected a massive spike in X-band frequency. It was like a spotlight hitting a man in a dark forest. The officer at the console leaned forward. His heart rate increased, but his voice stayed flat. "Major, we have an active illumination on Advanced AEHF-4. High energy. Stable." The major crossed the floor in 4 steps. He looked at the telemetry. "Is it a search scan?" "Negative, sir. This is a weapons-grade lock. Source is located in the Gobi Desert. It is an HQ-19 battery." The major looked at the digital clock on the wall. The lock had been holding for 3 minutes. In the world of electronic warfare, 3 minutes is an eternity. A scan is a greeting. A lock is a finger on a trigger. "Notify Strategic Command," the major said. "Tell them one of our primary nuclear nodes is currently painted for a kill. This is a Tier 1 alert." Across the globe, the invisible machinery of nuclear war began to turn. In the Gobi, the Chinese radar continued to bathe the satellite in high-energy pulses. It was a digital handshake between a missile on the ground and a machine in the stars. Both sides were now staring at each other across the ultimate high ground. Neither side knew if the other would blink first. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 2:21 in the morning, Colorado Springs, Colorado. The alert tone at Schriever Space Force Base was low but persistent. It was a sound designed to cut through the hum of cooling fans and hushed voices. On the main tactical display, the icon for the Advanced AEHF-4 satellite was flashing. A yellow halo pulsed around it. This was the system's way of indicating an external influence. The satellite was 22,000 miles above the Earth. It was parked in a geostationary orbit. To a missile battery on the ground, a geostationary target is a mathematical certainty. It does not move relative to the radar. It is a fixed point in the blackness. The technician at the console spoke. "Major, the lock is not drifting. It is centered on the primary communications bus." The major stood behind him. His eyes were fixed on the signal strength indicator. They are not just tracking the frame. They are aiming at the electronics. If they fire, the satellite will not just break. It will be vaporized. "Sir," the technician added, "the frequency has shifted to a terminal guidance profile. The battery in the Gobi is simulating a launch. A terminal guidance profile is the final stage of an attack. It is the moment when the computer stops searching and starts killing." 2:23 in the morning, the Gobi Desert. Inside the Chinese command van, the atmosphere was clinical. There was no excitement. There was only the steady execution of a checklist. The HQ-19 interceptor was a masterpiece of engineering. It was designed to hit targets in the upper atmosphere. Attacking a satellite in high orbit was a stretch of its capabilities, but with the right boosters and a stable lock, it was possible. The lead operator adjusted a dial. Signal-to-noise ratio is perfect. The American satellite is not maneuvering. It is staying in the basket. The basket was the kill zone. The battery commander watched the screen. He was a veteran of 2 decades in the People's Liberation Army. He understood that this was a game of nerves. He also knew that his orders were absolute. The commander spoke into his headset. Headquarters. This is Site 7. We have achieved a stable lock. Target remains stationary. We are holding at the final stage before ignition. Confirm our status. The response was immediate and cold. Site 7. You are to hold the lock. Do not initiate launch. Await further instructions. The commander looked at his lead operator. They know we are here. They are watching us watch them. Back in Colorado, the major was no longer looking at the screen. He was on a secure line to the Pentagon. The major spoke clearly. The lock has been held for 8 minutes. This is no longer a sensor error. This is a deliberate demonstration of force against a nuclear command asset. We are moving to DEFCON 3 for all space-based assets. In the silence of the operations center, the weight of that statement settled. DEFCON 3 meant the units were ready to move. It meant the time for talking was running out. The satellite continued its silent orbit. Below it, 2 superpowers were now tethered together by a beam of invisible radar energy. The link was stable. The tension was not. 2:26 in the morning. Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska. Inside the Global Operations Center of United States Strategic Command, the atmosphere had shifted from routine monitoring to the brink of crisis. The commander of Strategic Command, a 4-star general, stood before a wall of monitors that stretched 30 feet high. On the center screen, a digital map of the Earth showed a single, glowing point over the Pacific. "Sir," an officer said, his voice tight, "the lock on Advanced Extremely High Frequency 4 is still active. The Chinese battery has transitioned from a simple track to a fire control solution. They are currently calculating the lead time for an interceptor launch." The general did not move. He understood the gravity of that specific satellite. It was not a camera. It was a relay. The nuclear command and control system. It was the digital link that allowed the President of the United States to communicate with nuclear-armed submarines and missile silos. If that link was broken, the American nuclear deterrent would be blinded. "What is the status of the secondary links?" the general asked. "We are shifting traffic to the older Milstar satellites," the officer replied, "but the bandwidth is a fraction of what we need. If they take out the main node, we lose 70% of our secure throughput to the Pacific Fleet." This was the nightmare scenario for strategic planners. A kinetic strike in space was not just an act of war. It was a decapitation strike against the very systems that prevented war through the threat of retaliation. 2:28 in the morning. The Gobi Desert. The heat inside the Chinese command van was rising. The electronic equipment was working at maximum capacity to maintain the beam on a target 22,000 miles away. The lead operator wiped sweat from his upper lip. On his screen, a countdown clock was running. It was not a countdown to launch, but a countdown to the satellite's next orbital window. "The target is entering the optimal firing arc," the operator said. "In 2 minutes, the probability of a successful intercept will reach 95%. The battery commander looked at the red diamond on his screen. He was receiving data directly from the Central Military Commission in Beijing. This was a demonstration of a concept known as Assassin's Mesa, weapon designed to neutralize a technologically superior enemy by hitting their most vulnerable point. The commander keyed his radio. "Beijing. This is Site 7. We are at peak probability. The system is ready for the final ignition command. Please confirm." The silence on the other end lasted 5 seconds. To the commander, it felt like an hour. "Site 7. The voice from Beijing finally said, "Maintain the lock. Do not fire. We are waiting for the American response to our diplomatic cable. If they do not move their carrier group, you will receive the order to terminate the target." 2:30 in the morning, the South China Sea. 1,000 miles away from the desert, the ocean was a field of dark glass. The United States ship, Abraham Lincoln, moved through the water at 20 knots. On the bridge, the captain received the flash message from Strategic Command. The satellite that provided his secure communications was under the shadow of a Chinese missile. The captain looked out at the horizon. "Tell the fleet to prepare for an immediate transition to radio silence. If that satellite goes down, we are in the dark. And if we go dark, the next thing we see will be incoming." The tension had moved from the stars to the sea. The machinery of two empires was now fully engaged. The lock was stable. The world was waiting. 2:31 in the morning. The Philippine Sea. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group began to vanish. It was not a physical disappearance, but an electronic one. On the bridge of the massive aircraft carrier, the admiral gave the order for Emission Control Alpha. This was the most restrictive state of electronic silence. The admiral looked at his communications officer. "Kill the radars. Kill the satellite links. We are going dark." The officer nodded. "Confirm. All active emitters are offline." In an instant, the fleet of 7 warships became a collection of steel ghosts. By turning off their radars and radios, they made it impossible for Chinese sensors to track them with precision. They were no longer broadcasting their position to the world. They were now navigating by the stars and internal gyroscopes. This was a defensive posture, but in the logic of high-stakes brinkmanship, it was also a threat. A fleet that cannot be seen is a fleet that is preparing to strike. 2:33 in the morning. Hainan Island, China. At Lingshui Air Base, the silence of the night was shattered by the roar of twin engines. 4 J-20 stealth fighters taxied onto the runway. These were the premier interceptors of the People's Liberation Army Air Force. Their pilots were the elite of the elite. The lead pilot adjusted his oxygen mask. He checked his tactical data link. The information from the HQ-19 battery in the Gobi Desert was being fed directly into his cockpit. He could see the position of the American satellite. He could also see the last known position of the American carrier group before it went dark. The tower controller spoke into the pilot's headset. "Raven 1. You are cleared for immediate takeoff. Vector 090. Maintain stealth profile. Do not engage unless fired upon." The pilot responded. "Raven 1. Copy. We are rolling." The 4 fighters lifted off into the black sky. They did not use their afterburners. They wanted to remain as invisible as possible for as long as possible. Their mission was to find the American fleet and provide a secondary target lock if the satellite link failed. 2:35 in the morning. The Gobi Desert. Inside the command van, the air was heavy with the heat of the electronics. The battery commander watched a new icon appear on his screen. It was the 4 J-20 fighters moving toward the Philippine Sea. He also noticed the disappearance of the American fleet on his long-range maritime radar. The commander spoke to his lead operator. "The Americans have gone to ground. They are hiding in the noise of the ocean. They think we cannot see them because their radars are off." The operator did not look up. "We still have the satellite, sir. As long as we hold the lock on their command node, it does not matter where the ships are. If we kill the satellite, the ships are useless." The commander looked at the stable red diamond on the display. The HQ-19 system was performing perfectly. The beam of energy was a tether. It connected the desert floor to the edge of space. It was a bridge that could become a highway for a missile at any second. The board was set. The pieces were moving. Now, the diplomats would have their turn. 2:36 in the morning. The Pentagon. Inside the National Military Command Center, the atmosphere was frozen. The Secretary of Defense sat in a small, windowless room designed for the most secure communications on the planet. He held a handset to his ear. On the screen in front of him, the status of the advanced AEHF-4 satellite was still highlighted in red. "The lock is holding," the secretary said. "Strategic Command reports the Chinese battery in the Gobi is in a pre-launch state. They are not just painting the target, they are preparing to fire." The president's voice came through the line, sounding distant but clear. "Give me the tactical assessment. If they fire, do we lose the link?" "Yes, sir. We lose the primary nuclear command link for the Pacific. Our submarines would be operating on emergency NE protocols within minutes. It would be a blind environment. Use the deconfliction line," the president ordered. "Tell them this is no longer a demonstration. Tell them we view a lock on a nuclear command asset as an act of aggressive intent. If that radar does not cycle down in 3 minutes, we will neutralize the source." 2:38 in the morning. Beijing. The underground command bunker of the Central Military Commission was a cavern of blue light and soft murmurs. A senior general stood before a map of the South China Sea. The red phone, the direct link to Washington, began to chime. It was a sound that had not been heard in this room for over a decade. The general picked up the receiver. He listened to the American translator. The message was blunt. The Americans were claiming that the lock was a precursor to a nuclear engagement. They were threatening a kinetic response against the Gobi site. The general looked at his tactical advisors. "The Americans have moved to Defense Condition 3. Their carrier group has gone silent. They are preparing for a blackout. They are trying to intimidate us," an aide said. "They want us to blink first." "No," the general replied. "They are not blinking. They are moving their finger to the trigger. They believe we are about to decapitate their command structure. In their doctrine, that justifies a full-scale response." He turned back to the display. The HQ-19 battery was performing perfectly. It was a technical triumph. But he realized that the technical triumph had created a strategic trap. By proving they could kill the satellite, they had convinced the Americans that they intended to do it. 2:40 in the morning. The Gobi Desert. The vibration from the radar array was now a physical force. It hummed through the floor of the command van. The power levels were at the absolute limit. Outside, the air around the massive radar panels was ionizing, creating a faint, ghostly glow in the desert darkness. The lead operator looked at the battery commander. "Sir, we have reached the final launch window. The interceptor's internal battery is activated. The seeker head is slaved to our radar. We are 90 seconds from the point of no return." The commander's hand was steady, but his eyes were fixed on the communications terminal. He was waiting for the final authorization from Beijing. He knew that the missile in the silo beside them was a kinetic kill vehicle. It carried no explosives. It would destroy the satellite by the sheer force of impact at 17,000 miles per hour. Beijing is silent. The operator whispered. "They are talking to Washington," the commander said. "We hold. We maintain the lock. We do not move until the order is given." The digital clock on the wall ticked forward. The satellite was exactly where the radar said it would be. The world was now suspended by a single thread of microwave energy. The morning air was cold. The tension was white-hot. 2:41 in the morning. The Gobi Desert. The hum of the radar was now a physical roar. Inside the command van, the air was vibrating. The lead operator's hand hovered over the final ignition key. On his screen, the status of the HQ-19 missile was green. The guidance system was locked. The interceptor was ready to fly. 30 seconds to the window, the operator said. His voice was a whisper. 2:41 and 30 seconds in the morning. Schriever Space Force Base. "Energy spike," the technician shouted. "The radar in the Gobi is at maximum output. They are saturating the target." The major looked at the wall. The red diamond was no longer blinking. It was a solid, bleeding red. This was the final stage. The target was being bathed in so much energy that its own sensors were beginning to fail. "The battery is at 100%, the major said. "They are going for it." 2:41 and 45 seconds in the morning. The National Military Command Center. The Secretary of Defense gripped the edge of the table. Status on the Abraham Lincoln? The carrier group is still dark, an officer replied. But we have 4 J-20 fighters closing on their last known position. The Chinese are preparing to strike the satellite and the fleet simultaneously. The secretary looked at the clock. The 3-minute window he had given the president was gone. Get the president back on the line. We are at the wall. We have to authorize a defensive strike on that battery now. 2:42 in the morning. The Gobi Desert. The battery commander received the final sequence. The automated voice of the system filled the van. It was cold and robotic. Target lock confirmed. Ignition sequence initiated. 10, 9, 8. The commander watched the screen. The red diamond was perfectly centered. The digital world was about to become a kinetic reality. 7, 6, 5. The ground beneath the van began to shake. A mile away, the heavy steel silo doors slid open. A cloud of white nitrogen gas vented into the desert night. It looked like a ghost rising from the sand. 4, 3, 2. The commander held his breath. His finger was an inch from the override. He looked for a signal from Beijing. There was only silence. 1, 2:42 in the morning. The Gobi Desert. The countdown hit 0. The battery commander braced for the thunder of the HQ-19 rocket motor. He expected the van to shake. He expected the desert to light up with the fire of 1,000 suns. The silence was absolute. The commander looked at the primary display. The red diamond had not just moved, it had shattered. A dozen identical icons blossomed across the screen like a digital infection. The stable, weapons-grade lock was gone. In its place was a wall of electronic white noise. "Abort!" the commander shouted. Status of the interceptor? The lead operator was typing furiously. His face was pale. The system has entered an emergency lockout. The radar is receiving massive interference. It cannot distinguish between the target and the background noise. The missile computer refused the launch command. It saw too many targets. Was it an American jammer? The commander asked. Negative, the operator replied. This is not a localized jammer. It is coming from everywhere. The entire ionosphere is screaming. 2:42 and 30 seconds in the morning. Schriever Space Force Base. The technician at the console stood up so fast his chair hit the floor. Major, the signal from advanced AEHF-4 is gone. But we did not lose the satellite. We lost the whole sky. The major stared at the telemetry. The clean data streams had turned into jagged, nonsensical patterns. It looked like the heartbeat of a dying man. Did they fire? The major asked. I do not know, the technician said. The X-band sensors are saturated. Every sensor we have in orbit is reporting a massive electromagnetic surge. It is not a weapon. It is the sun. The major looked at a secondary screen. It was a feed from the Space Weather Prediction Center. A massive coronal mass ejection, a solar flare of immense proportions, had just slammed into the Earth's magnetic field. It was a one-in-a-decade event. It had arrived at the exact moment the Chinese battery was reaching the peak of its radar output. The solar flare had interacted with the high-energy beam from the Gobi Desert. It created a phantom signature. To the Chinese radar, it looked like the satellite had suddenly multiplied into 100 targets. To the American sensors, it looked like the entire sky had turned into a microwave oven. 2:43 in the morning. The Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense had the president on the line. He was holding the authorization for a retaliatory strike. Wait, Mr. President, the secretary said. His voice was a mixture of relief and confusion. Strategic Command is reporting a massive solar event. All satellite communication in the Pacific is being disrupted by atmospheric noise. We cannot confirm if a missile was launched. What about the Chinese battery? The president asked. They have stopped transmitting, the secretary said. They are as blind as we are. The flare has effectively neutralized both sides. We are in a temporary ceasefire enforced by the weather. In the Gobi Desert, the battery commander stepped out of the command van. He looked up at the sky. High above, the atmosphere was glowing with a vibrant, pulsing green. It was the aurora borealis, visible this far south because of the intensity of the solar storm. The ghost in the machine had saved the world. The radar was dead. The missile was silent. Both nations were now forced to stop and think. The pivot had arrived. The immediate threat of war was over. Now, the danger was the confusion that followed. 2:44 in the morning. The Gobi Desert. The battery commander stood in the sand. He looked at the sky. The green and purple curtains of the aurora borealis were dancing directly over the radar arrays. It was beautiful. It was a sight that should have been impossible this far south. It was also the signature of a planetary-scale emergency. Inside the command van, the cooling fans were screaming. The screens were dark. The commander stepped back inside. The system had automatically tripped its circuit breakers to protect the sensitive receivers from the solar surge. Status: did the interceptor launch? The lead operator was resetting the master console. The missile remains in the silo. The door is still open, but the bird is cold. Negative, sir. The safety interlock engaged 3 seconds before ignition. The computer detected a catastrophic sensor failure. We need to get that information to Beijing immediately, the commander said. If the Americans think we fired, their response will be in the air before we can explain the weather. 2:46 in the morning. Schriever Space Force Base. The atmosphere in the Space Operations Center was one of controlled panic. Every satellite link in the Pacific sector was flickering. The primary display for the advanced AEHF-4 was a wall of static. The major grabbed the technician by the shoulder. "I need a status on that satellite. Did it take a hit?" "I cannot tell, sir," the technician replied. "The background radiation from the flare is so high it is drowning out the satellite's beacon. It is like trying to hear a whisper in a thunderstorm. We have lost telemetry." "What about the Gobi site?" the major asked. The radar signature vanished at the same time as the flare hit. They could have powered down, or they could have launched and the flare masked the thermal bloom of the rocket motor. The major looked at the red phone. He knew the Secretary of Defense was waiting for a single word. If he said launch, the United States would begin a conventional strike on Chinese soil within minutes. If he said unknown, he was gambling with the entire nuclear command structure. 2:48 in the morning. The Philippine Sea. On the bridge of the USS Abraham Lincoln, the admiral was watching the sky. The horizon was glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. His communications officer ran onto the bridge. "Sir, we are receiving an emergency broadcast on the guarded international frequency. It is unencrypted. It is coming from the Chinese mainland." The admiral turned. "Put it on the speakers." A voice filled the bridge. The English was heavily accented, but the tone was urgent. "All stations. All stations. This is the People's Liberation Army Air Defense Command. We have experienced a technical malfunction due to solar activity. We repeat. No launch has occurred. All interceptor batteries are in a safe state. Do not escalate. We are standing down." The admiral looked at the glowing sky. "They are scared," he whispered. They realized the sun almost started a war for them. 2:50 in the morning. The Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense listened to the recording of the Chinese broadcast. He then looked at the latest space weather report. The Coronal Mass Ejection had peaked. The ionosphere was beginning to stabilize. "The Chinese are powering down their batteries," the secretary said into the phone. "Strategic Command confirms the Gobi site is cold. We are holding our fire. We are moving back to Defense Condition 4. The immediate crisis had passed. The lock was broken. But the silence that followed was not one of peace. It was the silence of two giants who had realized just how close they had come to the edge. The satellite was still there, somewhere in the dark, silent and alone. 300 in the morning. Schriever Space Force Base. The electromagnetic storm was finally beginning to recede. The static on the monitors smoothed out into a steady, flat line. The technician at the console adjusted his headset. He sent a digital handshake signal into the darkness of space. He waited. 5 seconds later, a small green light blinked on his terminal. The technician let out a long breath. "Major, we have telemetry. Advanced AEHF-4 is responding. All internal systems are reporting nominal status. The electronics are intact. The major leaned over the desk. Check the propulsion bus. Did the Chinese radar cause any thermal damage? Scanning now, sir. Negative. The solar flare actually acted as a shield. It saturated the receivers before the ground-based radar could cook the circuits. The satellite is fully operational. The zenith lock was officially over. The command link that held the keys to the American nuclear triad was secure once again. There were no cheers in the room. The officers simply went back to their stations. They had stared into the abyss for 40 minutes. They were exhausted. 4:30 in the morning. The Philippine Sea. The USS Abraham Lincoln was no longer a ghost. The admiral gave the order to resume normal operations. One by one, the massive SPY-6 radar arrays on the surrounding destroyers began to pulse. The electronic silence was replaced by the familiar hum of high-powered sensors. The admiral stood on the bridge wing. The sky was turning a pale, bruised gray as the sun prepared to rise. On his tactical screen, the 4 Chinese J-20 fighters were visible again. They were no longer closing in. They had turned back toward Hainan Island. The communications officer spoke. "Sir, the Chinese fighters have switched their transponders to peaceful transit mode. They are heading home." The admiral nodded. "Keep our combat air patrol in the air for another 2 hours. I want a clear sky until the sun is up. Then we return to our scheduled training track." 600 in the morning. The Gobi Desert. The HQ-19 battery was being disassembled. The massive radar panels were being folded back into their transport trailers. The ionized glow in the air had vanished. The desert was just a cold, empty expanse of sand once again. The battery commander watched his men work. He held a printed report from Beijing in his hand. The report was marked Top Secret. It stated that the American carrier group had resumed its course. It also confirmed that the American satellite was still functioning. The lead operator approached the commander. "Sir, the equipment is secured. We are ready to move out." The commander looked at the empty silo where the interceptor had almost launched. "We proved we could do it. We proved the American shield has a weakness." The operator looked down. "But we almost lost the world to prove a point, sir." The commander did not answer. He turned and walked toward his command vehicle. He knew that the mission had been a success in the eyes of his superiors. They had shown they could lock on to the most sensitive American asset in space. But he also knew that the next time, there might not be a solar flare to break the connection. The morning was now fully bright. The crisis had resolved itself into a cold, professional peace. Both sides had stepped back, but the memory of the lock would remain. It was a new era of warfare. One where the line between a signal and a strike was thinner than a beam of light. 3 days later, Washington, District of Columbia. The Pentagon was quiet in the early morning hours. In a secure briefing room on the 3rd floor, a thick black binder sat on a mahogany table. It was titled The Zenith Lock Incident. This was the official after-action report for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It was only 40 pages long, but it represented the most dangerous 27 minutes of the modern era. The report confirmed what the sensors had suggested. The Chinese HQ-19 battery had achieved a stable fire control lock. For nearly half an hour, the American nuclear command and control system had been under a direct and immediate threat. The analysis was clear. Had the solar flare not occurred, the probability of a kinetic exchange was over 80%. The lead analyst, a retired Air Force general, spoke to a small group of senior officials. The Chinese did not just test a weapon. They tested our psychology. They wanted to see if we would treat a lock on a satellite the same way we treat a lock on a carrier. Now they have their answer. And what is that answer? The Secretary of Defense asked. The answer is that space is no longer a sanctuary, the general replied. It is a front line. The Zenith lock proved that our most sensitive nuclear assets can be touched from the ground. It has changed the definition of deterrence. 6,000 miles away, the western hills of Beijing. A similar scene was unfolding in a secure military compound. The commander of the Gobi battery stood before a board of high-ranking officers. He was being commended for the technical success of the operation. His team had maintained a stable beam on a geostationary target through extreme atmospheric turbulence. But the commendation was quiet. There were no parades. The Chinese leadership understood how close they had come to a catastrophe. Their internal report noted that the American carrier group had transitioned to a combat-ready state faster than their models had predicted. The Americans had not just hidden, they had prepared to strike back. One senior colonel looked at the satellite imagery of the American fleet. The Americans viewed the lock as a precursor to a nuclear-first strike. Their response was not defensive, it was escalatory. We must account for this in the next phase of our orbital strategy. The next phase? A younger officer asked. The next phase is redundancy, the colonel said. Both sides now know that a single satellite can start a world war. Neither side can afford to let that happen again. Military analysis would continue for years. Experts would argue whether the solar flare was a lucky break or a missed opportunity. But for the men in the Gobi Desert and the operators at Schriever Space Force Base, the lesson was simpler. They had seen the machinery of war move from a standby state to a terminal countdown. They had felt the weight of a world that was one digital command away from fire. The advanced AEHF-4 satellite continued its silent orbit 22,000 miles above the Pacific. To the naked eye, it was just a tiny, unblinking star. It was a piece of metal and silicon, drifting in the cold vacuum of space. But it was also a monument to a crisis that almost was. No missiles had flown, no ships had been lost. But the silence of the morning felt different now. The zenith lock had been broken, but the world had moved into a new and more fragile reality. The high ground was no longer a place of peace. It was a place where the next move would be watched by eyes that never closed. Modern warfare is a game of signals. Sometimes, the most important signal is the one that is never sent.